location, started a new project in an area that we have not built in before. We're up in San Carlos. And for those who are some familiar with Costa Rica, we're about 35 miles south of Volcan Arenal in an area called La Tigre. So instead of seeing many of my videos with a backdrop of the ocean, well, there ain't no ocean here. What there is a sea of green. This is a very fertile area of the country. It grows a lot of agricultural products, plants, flowers, ornamentals, basically anything and everything that grows here. And this is an area that, well, it's great for growing things in that there's not, there's a drier time in the season. It's never super dry here, and it's much shorter than much of the other, and its influence is mostly from the Caribbean side rather than from the Pacific side, because we're on the other side of the mountains. But this is an area I particularly like. It's very tranquil. We're up literally at the end of the road here, and so up above us it's nothing but mountain, forest, and running water. We've been started on this project with the owners like 4 years ago. So finally we moved ahead and we're, well, in the ground. So what today's subject is about is a dirty little subject called septic treatment. And I got really reminded because I'm not working with my usual crew. You know, people that I'm used to, subcontractors and whatnot, down in the South Pacific area, which are kind of, shall we call it, used to some of my weird ways. And to put this in context, yeah, I come from farming country in Canada, so I certainly was familiar with septic systems. And, well, and different concerns there, particularly with how you protect them from wintertime conditions. So we don't have much problem here, but certainly familiar with rural areas, to put it mildly. Now, something to be aware of in Costa Rica is there's very few actual big-scale sewage treatment plants. San Jose is in a big push now to get a lot of the Central Valley into sewage treatment. Other than that, there's one plant out at Punta Arenas, there's one up at Liberia, and there's one down in San Isidro General or Perez Zeledon. But generally there isn't, so especially in, you know, that's been the traditional. Here, certainly in a rural area, it only exists in your own septic systems. But anyways, with this move here, it sort of reminded me, so I want to go into a bit more detail about what I would call the misconceptions or just foolery with regards to septic systems and what you do to build a good system. A good system here is extremely rare. You hear in the back guys moving our rock around on our septic tanks. I only use and have only ever used here fiberglass tanks. I find concrete just a pain in the ass and not particularly efficient, shall we say, and very hard to manage. There's just a couple of Achilles heel that you have to respect so you know what not to do. So if you follow those warnings, then you don't have a big problem. If you detract from them, oh yeah, and then you're in a house 5 years later and you're spending a fortune to redo it again, which is pretty freaking common. Or systems that simply don't have capacity. Now, they passed a new law in 2004. When did it get enforced? 2020. So these new tanks all meet the new requirements, so they've made them quite a bit bigger, and particularly, we'll go on and I'll show the system here, but just to give you the lay of the land here was my point. And working with new people, I realized, you know, just how little anybody knows about septic treatment. Especially get out in the countries, and it's just bizarre. Some of the old wives' tales they've adopted as fact. Anyways, and I'll cover off some of those as we go through this. But anyways, so that's sort of an introduction as to how we ended up here in this. Well, it's a gorgeous part of the country. I mean, we're just a little bit under 600 meters of elevation here, so it's a nice temperature. It's wetter than a lot of areas of the country, so if you have an aversion to rain, this is not a place to be. But we've had 2 beautiful days here, which is nicely now that we've got this here ground open and putting in this field and septic tanks. Not having deluges of rainfall is definitely rather convenient, to put it mildly. So yesterday we installed the tanks and cut all the channels we had the backhoe in here all day. We cut all the channels for the drain fields, and my drain fields are much larger than people typically do, but having too much drain field is like being too happy. It really doesn't exist. So here what we're doing is we're installing a drain field under what will be a garden and parking area. And as I go through this, I'll be covering off myths. People get some, bluntly speaking, weird ideas about how a septic system should work and what separates a good from a mediocre or bad one. And now I'm emphasizing this with the clients, particularly what's so upside down here is, these owners may well be here until their great-grandparents, or their kids will be taking over from them. But this property will highly unlikely ever leave this family. It's a big finca, that was clear-cut years ago for cows. Well, that's not the plan now, so they may well be, I think the plan in general, they're going to be planting this to make it productive. Right now it's growing grass. That's not particularly productive, to put it mildly. But anyways, the point is, if you looked at, they're moving from Maryland with 3 young children. So this is, a long term. And he says, okay, now what's upside down is if you're doing this in Maryland, somebody's going to build a house and think maybe in a 5-year window, and they'll sell that house and they'll move on to someplace else. Now, first of all, the construction standards and the inspection standards are drastically higher there in U.S. and Canada than here. This has just been the wild, wild fricking West, and you really see some dumbass shit done, pardon the pun. One of our neighbors put in a septic system. It consisted of 3 concrete culverts stacked on top of one another, and they called that a septic. It's not a septic. It's a freaking cesspool. That does not, cannot, and shall not work. It's going to mean constant pumping forever. The idea is that a good system should not need much pumping done to it at all. But that's what I call this upside down. Here people build houses and tend to hold it in a family for years and years. And yet you get cheap on infrastructure stuff that comes back to bite you in the ass 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And there's nothing uglier than digging up a septic field. There's nothing about that would be described as fun. And not cheap, and then total destruction typically of an entire yard area, work area, and whatnot. And and in this system design is we need a flat space to put it, because the septic field is not sloped. It is perfectly flat. And we'll be going through that when I go off camera and explaining how and why that is done that way. But that's what I said is the complete upside down theory. You've got people building houses they plan on keeping in their family, multi-generational, like literally forever. And yet you get cheap on infrastructure stuff that is so expensive and ugly to fix down the road versus in the US where you're building better for something that's basically a short-term holding. I mean, if that isn't backwards, I don't know what is. But anyway, so that's sort of the context that we lead into this series that I'm doing. And I've done it before, but I mean, emphasizing other things I've seen, especially moving into this new area for us and running into suppliers and subcontractors who, you know, when I ask for something, they just look at me like I've got a second head. What? You know, I went to the fair tree the other day to buy pipe. We don't have any of that. Why? Because nobody buys it. So I had a special order in pipe from San Jose because there was literally not a single entire length of good pipe in the ferretria, and this is a pretty good sized ferretria. So, you know, I understand they're not inventorying material that nobody buys. So this good sized ferretria means nobody that's using that ferretria is buying this pipe. They're buying what they call sanitary grade, which is crap. And which doesn't make any sense about that is, yes, it's cheaper, but I'm going to give some demonstrations of how much difference there is in thickness of these pipes. And what a stupid place to try to save some money. Yeah, you're going to save somewhere between 40 and 60% because you're buying PVC by the kilogram technically. When they price a pipe, they say, how much is the weight? Okay, this is what you pay at the cost. It's like going and buying steak, you know. So a pipe with thicker walls, automatically is using more PVC. But I mean, that's part of this folly. And I renovated a swimming pool in Guanacaste where they put a pressure line in using the sanitary grade pipe. Pressure line. 40, 50 PSI. I mean, no, it didn't work. But the other thing is, this is a country where the ground dances. You know, it's a seismically active area. So you're going to put delicate, rigid pipe, bury it in the ground, worse yet, bury it under concrete, and then figure, oh, we're good to go. Yeah, until an earthquake comes along and all of a sudden you got stuff all collapsing and breaking on because it's delicate, it's rigid, and it's buried underground. I mean, there is no good outcome to that. You know, it's basically impossible. It's not an if, it's only when this comes back to bite an owner in the ass. Anyway, so that's the introduction. We'll continue on with real examples of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. Oh, it was such a dirty, hot subject talking about all this shit that the thing shut down. Anyways, okay, continuing on, the two Achilles heels to fiberglass tanks is they will float if you don't keep them full of water. Water is very heavy. If they're full of water, they're not going anywhere. So we filled this yesterday before we even started putting anything around it, so it can't go anywhere. Just let, now we're dumping more rock here. Now the other reason for doing this is we can't compact around that tank. And if we put dirt in there, this sucker's going to drop anywhere between 8 inches and a foot over time, over the next 4 years. Versus if we fill that full of rock, it's quite compact. You know, it's a lot more dense and it's not going to drop out of sight. I mean, it's a garden area, so it may can drop some, but not that excessive. Now, the other reason too is that all that rock, if you fill something full of dirt, it will compact like a bitch in time, but then that puts pressure on the tank. This is like a big shock absorber, so that if there's when there's ground movement, it won't affect the tanks because the rock is like a big, all those little rocks are like a big shock absorber when it comes to backfilling the tanks. So another, reason, they're not as tough as a concrete tank, without any question. They just work one hell of a lot better, and they're a lot more manageable. You can imagine if we had to come up here with a big truck and a crane dropping several ton tanks in the ground. That is a real logistical bitch. And it's not easy getting up this road. It's fairly soft yet. So making that turn down at the bottom there at the end of the driveway, no, not easy at all. But anyways, that was, and as you'll see, well, in this flow of tubes here, everything is done with, you never use a 90-degree turn, never. That is just a disaster. All of these are going to be made up of, if I got to turn 90 degrees, I make it with 245s. So you make it soft turn in any of these. And as we get through this, I'll also show you another what to do here. So don't want to get run over by a backhoe. Anyways, he brought the one truckload rock in, but that's not gonna do all of this because I mean these channels here are basically 2 feet wide, and it's about 2 feet deep of rock that we put around that surrounds all of the tubes, and you can see there now they're running a level line. Good old-fashioned water level, which is the only way even sophisticated equipment hasn't figured out how to shoot a level down below surface. Because that's another thing, you know, another common habit is they want to apply plumbing rules. Okay, once it leaves the septic tank, it's no longer normal plumbing at all. Normal plumbing, in order to have solids flow through the tubes, you have to have a 2% slope. So if you go 10 meters, for example, you got to drop 20 centimeters in 10 meters. And that's what's been proven to work. You call it the law of shit, whatever. It is literally a law, not more, not less. But, of course, that's to get the solids into the tank and not to have any blockages in the line. However, I will be showing you, we'll be putting out a clean out on the other side of the house, so if there's ever a problem, there's a place to run a snake. If somebody does something dumbass, whatever, there needs to be an escape route. Anyways, but when it leaves here, it goes down that tube. That's your effluent going down, not solids. That's called a settling tank. So that's for the solids to settle out. So that's why a tank is always long and narrow, is to give the space. Now, a lesson there, they used to use, people are used to use plastic tanks for septic, which can only be described as incredibly insane. First of all, you bury a plastic tank, it's like burying a beer can. And there's no support, so they just fold up like a beer can. You know, these tanks all they're full of crossbars. There's bridging in there to separate and maintain the integrity of the tank. But what you need in these is you need a length of run, because when somebody flushes the toilet, think about that turd gets carried down that tube, makes a turn there, comes into the tank, you know, it enters right there. You can just see that round rock is plugged a little bit, which we'll be cleaning out. But anyways, so that's where everything goes in. It's a double 45 to take it across to the toilet. And then there will be a clean out. A tap will go on the other side of the house, so that with the threaded cap on it, so that you can, and you ever have a problem in the future, you can just run a snake through there, problem solved. I mean, as we say, shit happens. But, you know, if you don't have a way of snaking it, that becomes an ugly problem, versus this is just a mild inconvenience. But anyways, so continuing on, the point is they're long and narrow because you want that turd to get carried into the tank, and then as it flows across the tank, it drops to the bottom and decomposes. So what gets to this side of the tank and comes out this exit is lower than the entrance. So the effluent goes through there, drops down that tube, and enters the bottom of the biodigester. And then basically pushes that water up through that biodigester. And eventually, when it gets full, it exits this side and then enters the drainage field. So this is I'm sure you're sitting on the edge of your seat because this is so captivating and exciting to know all of this shit. Don't quote me on talking dirty too. Oh, I'm assuming some of these Estella is listening in too. But anyways, no. Anyway, so yeah, that's as close as I get to X-rated in public. Anyways, we'll continue on as we assemble this so you got an idea of what's going on. But anyways, now those are completely outlawed. I mean, it was always an insane idea, you know, taking a round plastic tank that was cheap, much cheaper than these are. And, well, Estella will know this. There's a famous saying called the tres B's. Bueno, bonita, barato. And he says, no, I keep saying this to Ficos. I have a Canadian version of that called the 4 B's. Bueno, bonito, barato, bullshit. And then I have to explain to him what bullshit is. Because you can have 2 of those. You can't have 3 of those. That's what all my conversation to you today was. Knowing what you're doing, where to spend smart money, and where not to spend stupid money. You know, to me, smart money is when there's an ROI in that you have way less maintenance problems and just generally more efficient. But, you know, it's always, you know, as we say, the chickens always come home to roost. So that's what, you know, today's theme is. Chickens coming home to roost and know what you're doing and why the heck you're doing it. So, anyways, so I'm almost 10 minutes of, wonder how this one's going to send, but this is a long one. But oh, anyways, as we assemble this, the point is that tube is going to go into this bed of rock and sends its tentacles out across the whole parking area. That is level, because we want it to disperse evenly in the whole area. Now, a typical habit, which Angel has done for other people who aren't quite as well informed, and they want to slope this line like they do a line with a turd floating through it. Those are very different situations. This is effluent. It does not have turds floating in it. It has particles that will be carrying out, hence why it's called effluent. But there's no solids there, so it's a different game here. But if you slope that there, you know, and that's your room when water runs downhill. If you slope that, that means all that water is going to rush to the end of the field, and so it's going to be feast or famine. The end of the field will get buried in effluent, and all the uphill stuff will get none. So instead, that goes out into these tubes that are set level so that the water flows into the tubes gently. It raises the level in them all, and then it weeps out the holes that we make in these tubes. What we're putting in here, you can't buy it in Costa Rica. I think it's made someplace in the US, but that's not practical for here. Here we make it. And you'll see people, you know right away they don't know shit when you see them using weeping tile. Trying to think, what is it? Oh, gringos call it French drain. Canadians do not. If I say that to them, they have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. Anyways, there's nothing French about it. Anyways, but weeping tile / French drain has holes all the way around the tube, little slits. Well, those stupid little slits get full of shit over its time, you know. Whereas we're drilling 5/8 inch holes so that nothing plugs up these holes. If you plug up that drainage line, well, then it's not a drainage line. And this is a fairly common problem to happen 10 to 20 years down the road. So that's what's part of all this is in thinking, well, what is going to happen? What is nature going to do? So cooperate with her. This is not a woman. You never win an argument with this woman. I'm not sure you win with any woman, but that's one you definitely don't win an argument with. So hopefully Stella's listening and it gets my little jibe, my male chauvinist jibe. But anyways, so that's why, you know, and I've never ran into anybody in Costa Rica who knows this. They do it in all those other ways, but I mean, sorry, science is on my side here, and I'm going to stick. You know, as I said, if somebody's not arrogant, if you explain it to them and says, okay, this makes perfect sense. You don't need to be a shit specialist to figure out how this could and should work, not how some old wives' tale says that you do goofy shit. Anyways, time to shut up. 13 minutes. Okay, another edition of our dirty little story about septic. Anyway, so we're back here another day, and we finished our trenches yesterday in the pouring rain. So right now at this time of year, getting 3 days without rain is like a small miracle. But anyway, so we continued and we put down our crushed rock bed with our pipe embedded in the rock, and then on top of that a geotextile. Now this is the point of the geotextile, is you do not want your bed of rock getting contaminated with fines filtering down from above or roots, whatever. Now this is a parking area, so obviously roots should not be a problem. Anyways, that is the whole idea, is to keep that bed underneath basically non-contaminated, so that it will continue to filter good for years and years to come. So the geotextile above this is incredibly critical. So, and we knew very well when it started raining that our trenches were all going to start collapsing in, just like they did. You know, it's not deep science. Anyway, so we got a bit of you can see we got a side hill slope here. So as we're getting to the end of the field, of course, our pipe is getting closer and closer to the surface level. So our last one here right now is, we're only about a foot below, 30 centimeters below the current surface level. Now, when we have this all cleaned up, it may be somewhat higher than that, but at any rate, our depth is varying. You know, as I said, you know, the pipes have to be level, because the whole idea is that the effluent enters here. Now, the first bit of pipe here coming out of the biodigester right to here, from the that's regular pipe. So from here, the pipe changes to this perforated pipe that we create on site here. So anyways, you can see here we're substantially different, deeper in, because our whole field is sloping, which is, you know, that's not a problem. And obviously if your pipe is level and your above surface isn't, there's going to be differences in the depths of the channels. Duh. Anyways, but the whole point, now I've got a couple of pipe samples here, and you can see where we finished it yesterday. I wasn't going to take a video in the pouring rain. Anyways, this gives you an idea of, not the most, okay, there's, on the left side, the smaller pipe is sanitary grade, and the right side is what we call Schedule 26 here. So you can see that it is pretty much close to double the thickness. So that is a resistant pipe versus this is, you know, sometimes this is used above ground or areas that are less critical. Certainly not under concrete, God forbid, but it's done all the time. Anyways, well, you'll see, we drill a hole through the center of the pipe, 5/8 inch hole. So the whole idea is that the hole is big enough that it won't fill up with crap, but it also won't let the rock inside the pipe. Like, that doesn't work. Your rock does not go into the pipe, because obviously we don't want rock in the pipe. So now if you can imagine this is, you might call this a half-assed pipe, in that the bottom part behaves as a pipe, the top half not. So what happens is, as toilets are flushed in the house, that flushes down into the holding tank, raises the level in the holding tank, and that drops down and comes up in the biodigester, and of course forces the level higher in the biodigester, and that water flows out of the biodigester and into the field. So that gradually raises. Now, because these pipes are level, what it's going to do is gradually seep throughout the whole network of pipes and gradually raise the level of the pipe, and then it basically just trickles out of all of these holes. I haven't calculated how many holes there are, but I mean, that's, we got 7 tubes, so that's 42 lineal meters, and there's basically 10 holes per meter. So, okay, so we have 420 holes here for this effluent to ooze out. Because you can imagine, if we slope the pipe, all the water is going to basically rush to the lower end. So this piece of pipe here, this section here is going to get flooded, and everybody up there is going to be starved to death. So you have, a half-assed field. You don't actually, the whole point of a field is equal distribution, so the whole area basically gets the same amount of effluent oozing out of these 420 holes. So again, this is not really deep science, and yet nobody does it. Anyways, oh well, and here's another myth. Well, I'll go over and we'll do an example of that. But anyways, so getting down here on our knees, see, we've got, there's, you can see the hole in the side of the pipe there on that side, and we have a sister hole on the other side of the pipe. So I said that all gets covered in, and then on top of that, this is our geotextile, as I said, which is a very important part of the whole system. Is that basically, I'm not going to win any cinematography awards on this, but anyways, that's not what I'm here for. Anyways, now you can see this sits on top, and now this dirt will go on top of this. Now, the deeper trenches yesterday, of course, with pouring rain, is, the trenches started collapsing. Well, not too deep, it's a thing called rain, dirt, gravity. That's the end result. Okay, so myth number 2. Okay, this is not really, and no, we're not punishing Delvin here for being a bad boy, and he did not escape from the chain gang at the jail. I've never had this trouble before, but anyways, this, we simply, we're only 30 miles from a bloody volcano, but I haven't been able to find here any, normally I have been able to find volcanic rock, crushed rock, that looks like this size of this regular rock. But look at this closely. That is not porous. What you want is something that's porous. Well, not what we want,
It's what our little bacteria friends want. They want billions of condominiums. So, you see there? That's full of holes. Condominiums for your bacteria friends. So, I mean, there's literally billions of bacteria will inhabitate this and eat our human waste and send out a rather harmless effluent. Anyways, so we couldn't. I found the rock all right, but I couldn't find anybody that's crushing it. So that's what we're doing here, the old-fashioned way, crushing it up, and then we'll be dumping that in the fafa. Well, that's what they call it here. So that's an abbreviation of the Spanish terminology, but it's a biodigester is what it is. So that rock's going to go in there and displace this water that's going to send out and do the first flush in those pipes. So yeah, it's a little crazy. Well, I've never had to do this before, but I mean, we can't close this up without having our rocks. Now, the easy way out, it would have been a whole lot easier just to take this crushed rock and dump it in there. But that's not what you want. I mean, yeah, it works sort of half-ass. I mean, it's certainly better than what this all too typical system is, but it's not, knowing very well. And when the truck got here, they told me it was going to be not small. I asked for small pieces, the size of your finger, and this is what I got. Oh, okay. Now, in this drainage field, another simple bit of science. Guys here will get rocks like this and dump it in those trenches. That's goofy shit. Let's take, it's about surface area. The whole question is surface area and filtration. Now, imagine that one rock, what its total surface area is. And if you take the same volume of these rocks, the surface area of all these small pieces is massively higher than one rock. So that's what they do, is they throw rocks in these drainage fields. Dumb, sorry, just plain dumb. That's no other way of describing that. But anyways, that sort of covers off the the two big myths covered in this lesson are drainage fields are level, they are not sloped. Now, the pipe that's going to the house that has, bluntly speaking, turds in it, solids in it, has to slope 2%. In a meter, it has to drop 2 centimeters. That's the law. Not more, not less. Now, I've seen lots of cases here also where the other, that's a third myth. They put in a bigger pipe, a 4-inch pipe, crap pipe, and then they slope it only 1%. Sorry, dumb. Now, when I talked about buying PVC and that PV is sold by the kilogram, well, if you take, I've got a piece of pipe here. Let's just take a look at, here it is. Now, again, okay, this is what they would typically be using for that line coming from the toilets. Again, you see the thickness of the wall. It's all this sanitary grade, pardon the pun, crap pipe. So no, you don't want crap in crap pipe. You want your crap in good pipe. But the surface area, now, of course, a 4-inch pipe has considerably greater diameter than a 3-inch pipe does. But to flush one toilet, you do not need a 4-inch line. That is just goofy shit. A 3-inch line, you can technically, in Canadian standards, you can technically run 12 toilets on a 3-inch line. This is not a big house. We certainly, how could you put 12 toilets in this? So anyways, so I go to a 3-inch line to reduce the amount of PVC used, but good stuff. Again, well, this is the typical. Put these two together. There's your difference. The 3-inch line, no. A flush and toilet, this will, but you know, the difference, this 4-inch line is going to consume, a good 20% more PVC to no value. I mean, what have I been discussing here? Value for the homeowner. Well, putting in 4-inch line is pissing money away and accomplishing nothing other than pissing money away. And on top of it, that 4-inch line, you got this delicate piece of crap pipe that can easily break. Believe me, they easily break. So use a small, more efficient line that will easily handle any normal residential application. Now, when we get to that, we'll discuss more about that line coming into the septic tank, which is a very important part. And regularly I see houses that don't have cleanouts. Now, even as though we keep this, you know, there's a toilet going to be sitting roughly here. No, right about here. So there's a straight run over to the septic. No, well, when it enters the tank, it's going to be a double 45-degree turn, which is another myth that is completely full of crap. Back to the expression. Now, when we go to make turns, this is what we want. And invariably in a layout like this, I have to do some 90-degree, in fact, I've got 4 90-degree turns in this whole system. But I don't use an elbow. You do something like this. You know, in the end, it's the same result. But the point is, it's just like if you're driving down a highway, freeway, how aggravating is it if they put every mile a stop sign? Well, if you put a 90-degree, and in good pipe like this, they are literally 90 degrees. So that fucks up your flow, bluntly speaking. So what we do instead is we put a 45 in, another piece, and then another 45. So either the sewage or the effluent can go softly, make that turn, and not cause. And also, if you put a 90 in, you can't run a snake through it. Impossible. They hit that, square corner and it stops. Because the thing is that there's going to be a toilet here and there will be a clean out here outside the house. There will be another pipe that continues on, and outside the house will be a threaded cap. I'll video it later. Anyway, so that if you ever have a problem or a kid dumps something in a toilet that flushes down and that screws up your system, well, if you don't have clean outs, you've just entered hell. But with a clean out, well, it's not fun, but it's relatively easy. Anybody with a snake can come in here. So you just unthread the cap that's just, slightly above or slightly below surface level. Run a snake through there and it'll go through and it'll make those turns and it will actually enter the septic tank. So another very simple, and yes, 245s cost more than 190. But I said, like a broken record here. But when you do stupid shit, you will, sooner or later, end up paying a price. So let's not do it in the first place. So there, lesson, another 20-minute, almost 20-minute lesson here on do's and don'ts. So there we've covered 3 common, really bad habits that are done, and that is putting the field, sloping the field rather than it being level, filling a field with rocks instead of crushed rock. Well, I guess third could be not using geotextile to make sure that over the years, I started this all with a 50-year life. So 50 years is a lot of time for a lot of stuff to filter down through the field. So anyways, we're starting to take our smaller rocks and dump them in to our biodigester. Now, pardon with the background noise, folks, but I mean, I try to do real videos, so we're at work, so you're seeing stuff happen as we work. So that, I'm not trying to do Hollywood here. I'm trying to do practical lessons that any homeowner could easily follow or hand to other builders and say, well, here's how I want it done. So that's the third thing. That was okay, back to our list. Okay, so as I said, miss is not a sloped field, crushed rock to make the drainage field, geotextile on top of that to stop fines from filtering it and contaminating that lower area, so that those rocks basically stay relatively pristine. Because fines and little roots and whatnot will really screw up a system. Number 4, never use a 90-degree turn. Never, never, never. So there's 4 lessons from today. Now, time to shut up.